Hello and welcome to Module 5 of this Django REST Framework course. Today we'll be building an e-commerce app in our DRF app. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into it. Right, okay, Module 5. So in the last video we kind of capped off our core app, our contact endpoint worked very, very well. Let's build out the e-commerce part of this, though. We're going to have a few different endpoints in this one. We're going to have items, we're going to have orders. So in the last one, it was just a create endpoint. In this one, it will be a list, a retrieve, a post. We'll be doing some validation, so kind of building on what we've already learned, right? So let's go ahead, jump straight into it. So this is the project. I'm in VS Code. Remember, each module has a steps file. So let's go in module 5 and let's go and preview. Pause it, make sure that your configuration looks similar to this. Oh, and before I jump into it, please like and comment on this video. Also subscribe, click the bell so every time I add a video, you're notified. There you go, that's that out of the way. So yeah, just make sure your configuration is the same as mine, right? And if not, you can always clone down from GitHub. Steps. Always have your virtual environment running, stands to reason, right? Okay, so new app. I said in module 2, I think that we were going to build 2 apps. We are, just needed to reword it. We've already done core. Now we're going to do e-commerce. So this will hold all the logic for items, stock, if this was a true e-commerce app, but we're just going to have items, a way of listing items and a way of making orders and displaying orders. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to go Python manage.py start app. Now I've got my Docker running, okay? You might not have. So I'm not going to be using my terminal anymore. It's a little bit small, I know, but you can see the commands I'm dropping in there. And I'll zoom in occasionally if I feel like you need to see it. But what I'm going to do, I'm in DRF course API. This is the API, the Django REST Framework app. If I paste it in here, I have access to Python 3.10. Start a new app. What is that doing? If I now go into back end, I've got volume set up. So anything I do in Docker will happen on my local machine. Fancy, I know. But that's what's happening. Same as core. We've now got access to all of this. It's not a Django tutorial, so I won't go through that. Sorry, I do apologize. Here we go. Here's the preview. Right, so we need to make changes to our settings file because in this app, we want to add some authentication. So I don't want to be showing orders created by Bobby to Billy. Okay? Of course you don't. You want some authentication. Now, Django has a very powerful authentication app built in. Okay, with DRF, it kind of extends on that and it entwines with the auth app in Django and allows us to do things like token authentication. Okay, so you send forward an email, sorry, username and a password, and it returns a token. If you pass that token in the headers of the request as authentication or authorization, I can't remember, Django REST Framework takes the request and goes, right, okay, that's a token. We know that token responds to Bobby, so let's give back the Bobby stuff rather than Billy stuff. Okay, really fancy stuff, really, really handy. So let's go ahead and copy this REST Framework stuff. Go into DRF, settings. At the bottom, if you remember in a previous video, we added this bit here. Just paste over that. You can see what we've done. We've added a default authentication class. There you go. Save, that's all we need to do. Next, say that's all we need to do. We don't. We now need to add this line to our installed apps, but you can copy the whole lot. Go back into installed apps, in settings, and we're now done and go boom. And this now gives us access to the application called auth token. Now there's some tables included. That's why you're adding it into installed apps. So when we migrate, it creates those tables. And it's like, it creates a token. There's a signal. So every time a user's created, it creates a token. And that token has a key. And that key is what's passed through. So URLs, now need to add that to our urls.conf file. So go into URLs and paste. Okay, so what's new? Got this. So REST framework auth tokens.views. So there's an app in here, lib, REST framework, auth token, views. There's an obtain token method that we can have access to essentially, okay? And then we pass that through to our URL patterns. So now we've got a new endpoint called obtain auth token. So if we pass a username and a password to that endpoint, we should then get a token in response. That token, if passed through on every other call to permissioned class view set will work. If you don't pass the authentication, it won't work. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to use Django's authentication app in Django Web Framework, Django REST Framework. Cool. What else? We need to now migrate those new tables. Okay, so I'm in Docker, you're not, or you are. Either way, you need to access the manage.py file. Manage.py, make migrations. Okay, I'll go ahead and do, there's no changes apparently. Two different commands. Making migrations creates the migration files. Migrating takes those files, bops it over to your database. Okay, so that's why there's two commands. Sometimes those migration files are already created, which is the case here, right? So we've just, let me have a look, zoom. Okay, we have just added two migrations. You can see you've got token proxy, see at the bottom, you've got auto. So that's an automatic migration file that's been created within the auth token app. And it's probably, let's have a little sneaky look, shall we? We go into DRF, auth token, their migrations files. There you go, you've got 3 migration files. The init file is creating a table called token with a key created in user. It's then adding, there's loads of different bits and pieces being added. Obviously, as this app has grown and evolved over time, they've added new fields, but that's what it's done. We've now created this in our database. Good, glad we understand that. Okay, let's add a signal. Okay, so every time a user is created in our database, we want to create a token entry in the new table in our database. Okay, so we now want to link them together. We go into e-commerce. We want to create a new file called signals.py. We want to dump that code in there. Now, what we're doing, what is a signal? A signal is, I don't know if it's a Django or Python, but anyway, it's a functionality that allows us to pick up a signal from a database. Okay, now this could be a post save or a pre-save. It's a signal, whenever the case may be, that is fired. Now we're picking up that signal, and we're picking it up, and we're doing something based on the type of signal that it is. Okay, so we're importing a whole bunch of gumph here. This isn't a DRF tutorial. This is just what's happening. This is the signal. We've got receiver. So this is receiving the signal. Okay, this is our antenna. Every time a user is created, that's the sender. Every time a user, that database, when that's created, fires a signal. We receive it. Okay, and then we say if that user was created. So each time you save a user to the database, sometimes it's not created. It's an update, right? So we're saying that if it's a created user instead of an updated user, we want to do something. And that something is create a new token. We link it to the user. Okay? Wonderful. So now when we create a user, we have a token accessible. Perfect. Now we want to add this little bit of code. You can take the whole lot, doesn't matter. How does Django know to make, to have that signal live? You go into apps, you can paste it all in, or you can just go def. This is a method for a class, so it's def ready. Pass through self, as we always do in these methods, and then we import e-commerce.signals. So now, or that's what you've done. Yeah, there we go. Now, when the e-commerce app fires up, the signal is good to go. The signal's live, it's listening, it's got its ear out, listening for that user signal. That's what's happening. But weak false as well. I never used to put that. I put that because if spit it out. If the signals are in rapid succession, sometimes this receiver doesn't pick it up. Don't know why, but if you put weak equals false, it does. That's what I've read on Stack Overflow, which is basically the Bible. Let's go and I've lost my train of thought. Here we are. Right. Okay. Now we can create super user. In the previous modules, I was going to do this, but then actually I would have had to have deleted it. So I haven't created any. There's no users in our database. Okay. So now we're going to create one. Go into Docker. Whoa, I just clicked. Crazy. So remember, that's what I'm doing. Manage.py create super user. Enter. It's going to ask me for some details. Bobby. Pop a little password in there. Repeat the password. we've got super user created successfully. See that? Happy days. Good. That user's been created, so I'd expect a token to be in the database now. Okay. So if what are we doing here? So okay, now I see what. Sorry, I need to be. What I'm doing, I'm running off ahead of these instructions, and I promised you I wouldn't do that, so I won't. So we've created a user. We now have a token, so we can now make a call to the new endpoint. Say, look, this is my username. This is my password. Please give me my token. Okay, and that's what these calls are doing here. Look. Okay, so we've got HTTP, which is the HTTP request. We're posting. This is a posting request. You can't do it with GET. That's the endpoint that we've got access to in here. See? API token auth. There we go. And then username equals, put your username in there, and password, your password. So what I'm going to do is, you know what? It doesn't really matter. So it's username equals, are these in brackets? What have we got here? No, they're not. Username equals, and this is Bobby. Password equals I'm in the wrong one. Sorry, I do apologise. Trying to make a request to from the API to the API. Okay, so I'll do that again. HTTP, so it's a post request, and it's HTTP API 8000. What was it? API token auth. API token auth trailing comma. We've got username. Username equals Bobby. Password equals that. Happy days. Can you see that? You can now. Move my mouse. Can you see that? Happy days. Right. So we made a request, and you see there. It doesn't show mine. Where it says token in a response, that is the token that has been assigned to me as a user. So what you would do now is you would save that in as a cookie, for instance. I don't know, it's up to you what you do in your front end. I'm not telling you how to do that. But when you now need to pass that token back through to the API every time you make a permissioned, authenticated request. So a class or a view that requires authentication, that token needs to be in the header, else you will not get a request or a response at all. All right, the endpoint works. This is brilliant. Okay, so that's the response you're going to get. That's it. Okay, so what we've done, we've got the e-commerce app, and before we've really jumped into it, we've added some authentication, token auth, to the app. This is starting to pick up speed now. So in the next module, we'll start building some bits and pieces out in e-commerce, serializers, views, and stuff like that. And hopefully we'll be able to start making some good calls. So before I close this off, please like and drop me a comment. Love the feedback, and also subscribe and click the bell so every time I add a video, you are notified. And this all helps me grow the channel. So thank you. And also, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.